Welcome to another edition of the Starke County Public Library's Beyond the Book Festival's Author Spotlight. Remember, folks, the Beyond the Book Festival is on September 30th, 2023 from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Central Time. Again, people have been having questions, Central Time. The Starke County Public Library is located in Knox, Indiana, and if you have any questions, contact us at www.scpls.org, or you can always just check us out on Facebook and Instagram. I'm Nicole, and today I have a guest interviewer with me. This is my friend and my fellow book clubber, Beth. Beth and I will be interviewing an author of such novels as The Possessions, Girl One, and her newest novel, Wonder State. Welcome, Sara Flannery Murphy.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
All right, Sara, before we begin, I just wanted to share how this interview came about. A few months back, Beth had picked up a copy of Girl One, and as she was reading it, she suggested to me, because I was in the process of starting this book festival, getting a hold of authors. So she said, "You should get a hold of Sara. This book is fantastic." And I said, "Okay, I'll send her an email." And I swear I did not realize you were from Utah. I'm sorry. If we had the funds, I would send you out here in a heartbeat, because I would love to have you here. It's fantastic. Your work is just, and you'll probably hear me say fantastic and amazing a million times, which, is not a bad thing, but I'm sure people get sick of me saying, "Hey, get into but yeah, so you responded, and I thought to myself, what a wonderful idea to have a Zoom interview with you, because not only do I want to share with our viewers and our patrons your work, because it's your opinion, everybody should know who you are, because like I said, I've read your stuff and it's fantastic, but I want other people to know that, hey, Sara's out here. You guys need to read her stuff. And it's just like I want to promote with this festival as well. It's like I'm bringing in these authors who I've read their work and they're not as known as they should be. So it's my way of getting the people out there, meeting these authors, trying out their work and saying, hey, there's more to life than, some of the bigger, and nothing against the bigger name authors, but there's people just as talented out there. So, and that's why I want to do this. I want to share your work with the world, that if they don't, obviously people, they know about it, obviously, but but yeah, without Beth, I would have never known. So I am grateful for her to suggest you to come on board here, and then also at the same time share your work with me. And so yeah, again, thank you, Beth, and thank you for Sara for coming on.
Well, thank you both for inviting me. I think every author very quickly realizes how key librarians and booksellers and readers are, to the success of a book. And it's just always incredible to connect with librarians and booksellers in any way already. I grew up in libraries, so they hold like a really special place in my heart. So I'm incredibly grateful to be part of this.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. Again, I thank you. So Sara, your new novel is Wonder State, and that just came out in July, I saw.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, of course. The Wonder State is set in my home state of Arkansas. It's my third novel, and it's the first one that I set in Arkansas. It took me a little bit to work up the courage to set something in my home state, because there aren't an overabundance of novels set in Arkansas, specifically in the Arkansas Ozarks. So I kind of wanted, I guess, to fill that gap a little bit. I grew up reading a ton of novels set in like New York and LA, which are amazing settings for books, and I devour them. But it's also fun sometimes to read about the place where you grew up. So the Wonder State is more fantasy take on growing up in Arkansas. There are 6 friends in high school who discover strange powers in houses scattered throughout their small Ozarks town. If you enter one of these houses, you might have incredible luck. It might make time stand still. They have a quest to find all of these houses, and the mythical final house, which is supposed to lead to another world entirely.
Oh,
This ends in tragedy, and they scatter after high school graduation until 15 years later, when the one friend who stayed behind in Arkansas draws the others back with a cryptic note. And it turns out she is missing, and they aren't sure whether she has brought them back to reconnect or for revenge, and they are pulled back into the world of these houses. So it kind of touches on growing up in a small town, my love of portal fantasies, a sense of belonging. And it's a very personal book to me, because it's it's set in Arkansas and the Ozarks where I grew up.
that's awesome. I'm definitely getting a copy of that. That sounds amazing.
Take my
Very
money.
amazing. Yeah. Uh, Take my money.
Take my money.
Um, I get what is it? I recently finished Girl One. And I would love to have a mini book club with you, if that's okay. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
we will try not to give out too many spoilers in case anybody wants to read this. So,
Yeah.
Beth, if you'd like to start, you can go ahead and ask a question. Fire away.
I'm just curious, what was the inspiration? I did read an article that you were in a lecture and you read the history of the body, I think it was, and that was sort of inspired this book. And I was wondering if that was true, if I read the article right, and if you could elaborate a little bit more on the inspiration for this book.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's that's exactly how I was inspired to write Girl One. I was in a course called The History of the Body that just covered like the ways, like through fashion, diet, sexuality, like the ways that humans interact with our own bodies and other people's bodies throughout history. And the section on reproduction included very early theories that people had about reproduction, which was very fascinating to me because I have grown up during an age where we have a pretty solid understanding of how conception takes place, So I grew up with I got the birds and the bees lecture, when I was a kid. And it was very illuminating to realize, wait a second, we didn't always have the scientific knowledge or the medical knowledge to understand what was going on. So there were all kinds of explanations that bounced around on kind of mystical interpretations and very weird interpretations. And the one that really sparked me was the way that men were kind of put at the center of reproduction. There was almost like this hesitancy, like, well, we can't admit that like the mother has a big role here. Even though I would think just from outside observation, that might be one thing you can notice about birth is that like one parent is pulling a lot of the weight here. But it almost seemed like people were a bit threatened by that and didn't want to acknowledge that so much. So there were all these theories that instead would be like, okay, yes, like maybe the mother is pregnant, like maybe she has, maybe she provides like the form of the child, but like without the father, this child would not have the soul and the intellect and all of these qualities that make the child human. There was this idea that like maybe if a woman kind of thought she was a little too much of like a free thinker, a little too independent, that she might have a child, that since that child would be self-conceived, it would not be like purely human, like it would be monstrous in some way. And my brain is always geared towards like fantastical interpretations. So I think, this would have been like in 2007, 2008. And I feel like that was really a heyday of, like Twilight and just all kinds of monster narratives, like vampires and werewolves all over the place, which I absolutely love. I feel like monsters are always kind of with us, but, that was the way they showed up back then. And so my brain was just like, ooh, like what if this could be like an origin story, that these ideas we have about vampires, witches, werewolves, people who have abilities that seem beyond what we know humans to have. What if the origin story is that they were self-conceived, that, they
Wow.
were
Yeah.
conceived just by the woman or just by the mom? So that's kind of the rambling explanation. But yeah, it was totally triggered by that course. So yeah, you did amazing research.
That's awesome. No, and I totally understand where you're coming from as far as that goes. Because when you talk about that, and you do touch base a little bit in there about the virgin birth type thing, it
Mhm.
almost like you don't mention it, but it kind of hits like a lot of religious sore spots.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely which is I mean, and I'm really surprised that you didn't go more into depth than that. But if you probably did, you probably have a lot of people very angry with with you with that.
Yeah, that was a hard one. I did have to kind of purposefully decide to step back from that just a little bit, and because I feel like there were enough ideas that I could work with in the story, and I was like, all right, I'm going to like maybe not touch on religion quite as deeply and just let this be a little more sci-fi and hopefully not step on too many toes, although I suppose every book does step on toes. So
Have
you can't fully avoid it, but I
have
kind
you
of made that
gotten
decision.
no, have you gotten any backlash from that? Just out of curiosity.
About religion or just
No, no, no,
about like
just the story
in
itself.
general?
The I can't pronounce the scientific term. The
Oh,
cryo, what is it?
parthenogenesis.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
Have
I've
you
had
got
to say that word a lot. So
I was just curious. I mean, any kind of negative feedback as far as that goes. I mean, yes, it's a story, but
yeah.
because you wrote it, I wasn't sure if maybe somebody just like sent you a nasty email saying, "How dare you write something like this?"
I have been fairly lucky in terms of not having too many readers reach out in that way. I feel like occasionally I get direct messages from readers, but I've been incredibly lucky that they're often very kind. If I do try to hold myself back from reading too many reviews because I think that can get you into kind of a strange headspace, especially when you're working on new projects. I feel like some people have had qualms with the way I wrote it, but there are people who think I went too far and people who think I didn't go far enough. So I've been pretty lucky, I guess, in terms of not having a huge backlash.
Well,
People
that's
seem to
good.
be,
That's
yeah,
fantastic. So,
yeah.
I always get concerned about that. It's like, and it's one of the questions that I had asked another author. I'm like, when you're writing this stuff down and you are like in the zone and you're really getting into it and you're thinking you're doing a great job, and then when you reread it, you're like, wow, did I just write this kind of stuff? My family or my
Yeah.
friends are going to be reading this. Do I really want to,
Yeah.
do I want to publish this?
Right.
Does
Yeah.
that go in? I mean, does that go through your head when you write stuff down?
It does. Yeah. I do have to balance that a little bit where I'm like, well, it's okay that my mom is going to read this. Like, I'm still trying to tell the story that I want to tell here. I think that's always like a very vulnerable feeling, not only with people but just like, well, how are readers going to take this? Like, is it 2x? Is it not enough y? That's like a very tricky balance of just kind of trying to always keep your readership in mind because of course readers are the ones who really bring a story to life,
Right.
but also trying to be true to what you want to put on the page, and I guess just believing that readers will be overall generous and like kind of meet you where you are too, and not, you can build up a reader in your head who's very critical and will dislike everything you write, and I have to be like, okay, that person is like imaginary. Like, overall readers are very generous, they're willing to see what you're trying to do, and I try to keep that spirit more in mind.
I
That's
thought there was a very good balance, where it touched on the topics it needed to, but it wasn't like in your face. And I did appreciate that. So as
Oh,
a
I'm
reader,
glad.
it
Oh,
was it
great.
was a good balance.
Thanks.
when I read this, and apologies. I mean, I don't know if you had this intentionally in there. I got references from like stuff like Stranger Things and Firestarter and Carrie. So I'm sensing a little Stephen King here. Am I right?
I do really love horror as a genre. So I think I think I have a little bit of horror in everything I write just because those books and movies kind of seep into the way I look at the world and into my own imagination. Right now, I'm writing a book that is meant to be like fully horror, and that is a little intimidating because it's one thing to kind of have horror tinged books and another thing to be like, I'm going to commit to this full stop. But yes, you definitely were picking up on my love of everything spooky.
You, yeah, no, that's funny because people already know that I'm a huge horror fan. Beth is as well. But I just, yeah, it just amazes me because I read so much. It amazes me how much his work influences people.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
and the mentions and the storylines and stuff like that are special takes and all that. So it's definitely one of those things where he has influenced a huge generation. But
Oh yeah.
also the cool part is, and I have touched base on this before, horror is making a huge comeback. I mean,
It is.
I love that it is. I think it's fantastic because it's always such an underrated genre. It really is. I mean,
Mhm.
people think, oh, blood, guts, gore. I don't want to read that, but horror doesn't necessarily mean it's that. It just means that there's so many sub levels, subgenres of horror. We're talking about thriller and psychological thriller and mysteries. I mean, your book in itself, I mean, you're talking mystery, science fiction, romance. I mean, you've got all sorts of that stuff wrapped up in there. Um, but yeah, I mean, when you get into it and you look at all the characters and stuff like that, and you think to yourself, man, this book is just got a little bit of everything. Beth, speaking of characters, what did you think? What did you think about asking her?
Well, as you know, it's always about the characters. Like if the characters are good, I can forgive a lot of plot. And luckily with this book, the plot and the characters were good. But the question that I had just strictly as a reader, and it's not as deep as Nicole's questions, is did you have a favorite character to write? Like I'm always interested in when an author is writing a character, if they get like attached to one or if they just really didn't like another one. And I was just curious if you had a favorite character that you've written either in this book or one of your others.
That's an incredible question. I think for girl one, I really, really enjoyed writing Kate. And I think that I tend to enjoy writing the characters who are maybe a little bit bolder and a little bit more unapologetic, because that is a quality that I don't think I have as much in myself, or I don't express it as much as a person. So whenever I get to write a character like Kate, who just kind of says what she thinks, she's still very compassionate and nurturing, but she doesn't really hold back if she wants to observe something. I I just have a lot of fun putting them down on the page. And I was really, really attached to Kate and had a lot of fun writing her. She was like a character where I felt like, well, I am writing her, I am technically bringing her to life, but she also feels so real and vivid that it almost feels like I'm kind of recording or documenting like somebody else who really exists in the world. So Kate definitely for girl one. Um, I think sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to write narrators, especially, well, like first person narrators like Josie, because I feel like they need to carry a lot of plot and exposition on their backs as well. And that can be kind of difficult to balance their own, like their voices and their personalities with relaying the right level of information to the reader. But in the end, I did really, really end up enjoying writing Josie too. I don't think she's super similar to me, but I really like the journey that she took, like both the literal road trip, but also like her emotional journey of like kind of questioning certain things that she believed. Like that did mirror some of my own experiences. So even though she was challenging, I did really enjoy writing Josie as well.
Oh, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Beth, who was your favorite character?
I also just really like Kate. I like strong characters who don't hold back. So she was my favorite. Um, the reporter, I didn't, well, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil anything, but I liked him in the beginning, and then I didn't like him so much towards the end.
That's understandable. That's totally understandable.
Off guard. Like that was actually a nice treat for me as a reader. That when there was a couple spots in the book, I was like, oh, I didn't expect that. That was pretty good. Like I like being surprised, and there was a few spots, ruining it for anybody who hasn't read the book. There was a few spots in the book where I was like, oh, that was a good one. She got me on that one.
Yeah, I do
always
like a
enjoy
couple of
that.
the twists that are in there. That those are good.
Mhm.
My favorite character was Isabel. I know, weird,
Oh,
huh? Because
no, I love that.
I love that she is like she's real quiet and she's real like she's real she's into herself and she doesn't really talk a whole lot. But then all of a sudden, like there would be like huge danger, and here comes Isabel. She just randomly shows up and saves everybody, and then she just
Yeah.
walks away. Like, hey, you guys ready to go? Let's go. You know, it was kind of a little bit of comic relief. But my biggest thing is I loved her power, her superpower.
Yes.
How did you
Yeah.
come up with that?
That all of their superpowers, and this was something that kind of evolved over the course of writing the book and also working with my editor. I think all of their superpowers kind of tie into different stereotypes, maybe that women have faced. So with Isabel, I just really liked the idea of like, well, it's almost like that line, like, well, I brought you into the world and I can take you out of it. Like she's able to kind of, instead of giving life, she kind of deconstructs it. I knew that I wanted her to have a power that was a little more dangerous and a little more fierce. I think Kate might be the only one who has a power that never is really used in a weaponized way. Like her power is only kind of healing and she can't really use it in a way that's dangerous. And that is something that I tried to do really mindfully, because I think there was a point where we were thinking like, well, maybe there should be a way for Kate to use her power in a way to, hurt somebody or defend other people. And or defend people in a kind of more violent or hands-on way versus like defending them in a nurturing way. And I really felt like, okay, Kate should have this power that is only used to kind of heal. And then I really enjoyed having Isabel just have a power that's like quite graphic and quite aggressive, and just kind of letting her run loose with it, like just kind of trying to let each of them have a power that allows them to explore it in different ways so they aren't, too identical.
Right. No, there's a point where it's really graphic, and I was like, wow, this is to have that. But then as she goes along, and as the girls go along on their journey, she learns to tap into it and just do it in certain ways. And then there's one point where they're like, well, how'd you learn how to do that? And she goes, oh, I just figured it out. It's like it's
Yeah.
very funny. It just cracked me up when it did that. But going back to Beth had a question about the characters when you were talking earlier. Did you want to go ahead, Beth, and ask her?
No, I just on the opposite end of what characters did you enjoy writing? Did you have any characters that you struggled with that you may not have liked, or you were like they don't fit? Maybe you took one out. I'm always interested in, what characters don't make the book, or if you didn't like one, or if you struggled with one in the book.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I'm always curious about that too. I always like have to think about all the characters who like almost made it into a book and then at the last minute like got cut, which I feel kind of bad for those characters. I don't think that I fully pulled any characters from this book. I there were quite a few of the daughters and mothers. And yeah, I feel like I have had a little bit of feedback where people are like, wow, there are certainly a lot of them. So I kind of committed to keeping them all in. I I feel like maybe writing Tom was a tough balance for me. Because I did want him to have a good rapport and to have a good, I didn't want him to be a character who was, without being too spoilery, he does have to kind of hold different elements within himself. Like, is he good? Is he bad? Like morally gray. And he's really the only one of the very few male characters who are really
Right.
on screen or not on screen, but on page and have like a major role. So he was a tough character to get right. And I always liked him, I think. Like, I feel like sometimes I'm always really happy when people who read the book are like, well, I did like Tom, or, I saw this complexity or subtlety in Tom. Because I think other people will sometimes be like, oh, like Tom, he didn't really get his chance to shine, or like he kind of got shoved to the sidelines. So I was trying to do that balance where he wasn't like the star of the show, but he could have his own personality and his own complexity. The relationship between him and Josie was hard to get right because like it had to make sense that they would trust each other, or that she would trust him, especially in the beginning, and kind of being able to build that friendship where it felt like it's realistic for them to like each other, but people aren't like, what is Josie doing? Like, this doesn't feel realistic. He was a very hard character to write, and probably changed a little bit throughout the drafts just to make sure that he was doing everything I needed him to do as a character.
That's so funny that you say that. That leads me into my next question.
Oh,
It's
perfect.
perfect timing. I saw when you talked about the relationship between Tom and Josie, Josephine, Josie, however the way, yeah. But it it almost seemed like it was fate, like kismet, that they were supposed to end up together. Especially, the night that they go to the bar and they start drinking and she starts
Yeah.
wanting to be honest with him. But then, you wrote it to where, and spoiler alert, I'm sorry guys, just fast forward to this. But you had said, or you decided not to go down that route with those two, that you
Mhm.
actually wanted to bring Kate and Josie together, which I found to be unusual in a sense because they might not have seen each other for 15-20 years, but they did kind of grow up as sisters, and they relate to each other as sisters. So to bring in that romantic dynamic was
Yeah.
kind of unusual. So how did you feel about writing that, or trying to get that in, or moving into that direction where Kate and Josephine were in a relationship?
I know that like the sister thing I know that has tripped readers up a little bit, which I totally understand. I think for me, I never really thought of them as like actual sisters. It was more like somebody that you grow up on the same block with
Mm.
or something, like as a child, or like a classmate, somebody who's, or just a really close friend from childhood. I think the fact that they both share this very unusual backstory, and kind of have this very big thing in common, maybe is something that draws them together. I I don't know that I always planned for Josie and Kate to be together, but the more I wrote, the more it really felt like the right thing to do. I think that Kate has this personality that's a really nice counterbalance to Josie's, because where Josie is kind of questioning things and like maybe quick to give her loyalty to people who aren't going to treat it with a lot of care or respect, Kate has a more pragmatic and grounded and like self-confident view of the world, where she's like, well, yes, this is the way I am, and I feel very strong in that, and I'm going to like use this to help other people, but I'm not going to question or apologize for it. And I think that that's something that Josie maybe admires a lot in her, and it just felt like the more the two of them spent time together, the more I could see how they were much more drawn together than any of the other characters. So it kind of rose very organically from writing them together. But yes, I don't really think of them as sisters so much as like people who knew each other in childhood and went through something very big together.
Right,
And yeah,
right.
and it I was really happy that they ended up together. I mean, I'm the one who did it, but it also felt like very romantic and nice to me.
Well, no, that's awesome. No, and it is. It's actually the way it's written is really beautiful. And
Thank
that's
you.
Beth would agree with me as far as that goes. And Beth, if there's any questions, just jump in.
I was actually very happy when, because I saw it at first, and again, I'm asking strictly as like when I'm thinking where I was when I was reading the book. And I remember going, oh, I don't know if I want her with Tom.
Yeah.
And then I saw it started moving away, and I was like, yes. So,
Oh my
because
gosh.
it's not that I didn't like Tom. I just, for whatever reason, I get very invested in the characters. So like I get, and I was just like, I don't think I like them together. And then so when it started moving away from that direction, I was actually like, I was relieved. And
Oh,
like I
good.
get involved in these books, and I was actually like, oh, and I went to my husband. I was like, that was a relief. And he had no idea what I'm talking about. I just walked away. But yeah, I was really happy that it started sort of detouring away from that, really, because I just didn't like her and Tom together. So, and I got very invested in these characters.
She does. She
I
really
love
does.
that.
She'll start yelling. Like we actually have a messenger on Facebook, and like she when like if we all agree to read a book, and then all of a sudden you'll just randomly your phone's quiet, and there's like 17 messages from Beth going, "Why is this happening? What's going on?
Oh.
Did we get to this part yet?" And it's just like
Oh,
she gets very, very. I love it. I love the fact that
I
she's
I
do.
love that.
I
Yeah.
do.
That's like the dream. I mean, to have a reader who cares that much about characters and is just like right there with them on every step of their journey. I mean, that's incredible.
I
Oh yeah.
read the book, and I can tell you that I loved it because I immediately listened to the book, and I only listen to books that I've already read and enjoyed. And so like within a couple weeks I listened to it again because I was like, I think I missed stuff when I read it. And so when you're listening to it, you have to go at the pace of the narrator, so you actually in some ways get more from the book from having it in that different medium. And so I really enjoyed like reading it and then listening to it because it was able to sort of bring stuff together a little bit more from the two different mediums of the story. So but
Yeah.
That's incredible.
We're running out of time, so I do have a couple of questions real fast for you. And they're kind of deep, so we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Um, when I read this book, I felt that there was a lot of feminism in it. Not that that's a bad thing at all. But is that how you wanted the book to be portrayed?
I did. Yeah. And I think, writing a book that's specifically feminist can be a little intimidating because, of course, feminism is a very broad umbrella. And, I haven't gotten certain elements of it right for some readers. People can have completely valid and important critiques of like, oh, it didn't go far enough here. It wasn't feminist in this way. And I think that is important because it kind of opens up those conversations and hopefully helps clarify like what works and what doesn't. But as imperfect as it was, I definitely was trying to bring a spirit of feminism to the book. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and you do get it. You do come across as that, and I didn't know if that was what you were doing purposely. But no, it is, and even if you look past all that, it's still a wonderful story that is just it's told again, it's told really well. I can't express enough how much I enjoyed it, and and these guys know, that when I enjoy a book, that the first thing I do is message them and say, you guys have got to read this. And I haven't done yet because I just finished the book yesterday, but I will. I think we're gonna make that our next. You know what? Honestly, I think we're gonna make that our next book club read. What do you think,
yeah,
Beth?
I wanted to suggest it, but I wasn't sure. It's not horror, and the other people do have a very horror, like they really like traditional horror. So I didn't know if this would be a book that they would enjoy, but that's why I kind of was like, Nicole, you need to read it because if you loved it, then I knew they would love it too.
No, it is. It is a
Oh.
wonderful book, and we're gonna have Sarah. You and I are gonna have to talk after this. Maybe you can join our book club for that meeting because I think that would
I
be
would love
fantastic.
that.
They've got
Yeah.
wonderful questions as well.
Oh, I
Um,
imagine.
One big last question before we head out. Going to the ending, and I'm not gonna, like I said, no spoiler alerts on this one, but the way that it ended, I was kind of thinking, and I was very, very happy about the whole mom situation. So thank you on that. Cause I was gonna start bawling when I found out what happened. And I was like, really? she's gonna go all this way, and then yeah, okay. So, but I appreciate that. But the way that it ended with the journal note, I was, or the letter, I'm sorry, not the journal, the letter. I was curious. It almost like is on a cliffhanger. Were you looking, this could end up being like a series for you, like the Girl One series. Would you ever consider something like that? I know, right? Hopefully.
I
I'm
will
hoping for a
consider.
series.
I think the way my imagination works, I tend to kind of go more for standalone books. Like I kind of hop from project to project, and I've never tried to write like two books that extend across the same story. But I do feel like there is a lot left to say, now that, especially now that the book has ended on this note where something that was very secret before is now very open. I would love to go back and explore, like maybe 10 years in the future, kind of see where the different girls have ended up and like how this has impacted the world. So yeah, I would, it's a little intimidating, but I would be very excited to return to these characters and to this premise. Yeah.
I definitely think you got a series on your hands because the way this is written, you can actually, it's like each girl, you can do a beforehand of how they were, they lived their lives after they left the compound or the homestead. So yeah, if you did, yeah, I definitely, I would read all of them because like I said, again, I can't express how much I really thoroughly enjoyed this book. But just to wrap things up here, Sarah, thank you so much for this interview and to spend the time with Beth and I. It's been amazing talking to you. I hope to see you in the future sometime. You never know, Beth and I do travel to these festivals. We might run into you.
That would be incredible. Thank you
Oh,
so much for
absolutely.
inviting me. This was an incredible conversation, and
Oh, yeah.
I'm so honored that you read the book and so happy that it resonated with you. I'm really, really grateful. Thank you so
I
much.
really enjoyed it. And I know that we've said that over and over, but um, as soon as I picked it up, I got a couple chapters into it. I was just hooked. And I am really looking forward to enjoying the rest of your work. And just
Understand,
thank
yeah.
you so much for doing this interview with Nicole. I've very much enjoyed meeting you.
I enjoyed meeting you so much too. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. And everybody remember the Beyond the Book Festival in Knox, Indiana at the Starke County Public Library is on September 30th of this year. It is from 9 to 3. And I always express this. This is like my go-to. That's Central Time. But again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Beth. And this conversation was fantastic. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.